I pray to the divinity in you. We already know that the purpose of life is to resolve that which is resolvable. Forces that have come from the unconscious into the conscious mind. To understand how to do that, we use the wheel as an analogy. We want to take actions in the world that bring about consequences that can resolve that which is resolvable. In an analogous way, we want to turn the wheel. But the wheel will not turn unless it has spokes. And if we put spokes in the wheel, if we can turn the spokes, the wheel will turn. That is analogous to taking an action. And what are the spokes of the wheel? The wheel itself really is what? It's the body. And the four spokes are the four functions of mind. Now remember, the mind moves first before the body can take an action. If I asked you to raise your hand, before you could raise your hand, you first have to entertain a thought. The mind moves first, then the body moves. This is critically important to understand. The mind moves first, the body follows. So these four functions of the mind, illustrated by these spokes, they move before the body moves. So what are these four functions? The first is called manas. And manas has the Sanskrit prefix man. It means to think. The human being is a thinking being. And the manas acts as an importer and an exporter. Okay? And for that project, the manas employs the five senses. The manas is that function of the mind that engages the senses to look, smell, taste, hear, and touch, and bring information back into our awareness so that we can determine what kind of action we're going to take, or if no action is going to be taken at all. That's what the manas does. Engages the senses to go out into the world, to look and smell and taste and hear and touch. The second function of the mind is the ego. The ego, we learned, is called in Sanskrit aham kara. It's the I maker. Anything which separates us from our essential nature, sat, chit, anand, eternal, consciousness, wisdom, and bliss. That spirit that is within us, that is us, having this human experience. And the ego is always dividing things up. Dividing things up between good and bad, pleasant and unpleasant. The next function is called chitta. The chitta is our unconscious mind. This is the chitta, the unconscious, the storehouse of all of our merits and demerits, everything we deem essential for self-preservation. So the manas, the ego, and the unconscious mind, they all move before we take an action, because the spokes are moving before the wheel is allowed to move. So once the manas engages the senses, and the ego weighs in what it deems essential to self-preservation, it says, oh, this is good, let's do that. It reprises a memory of pleasure. Let's not do that, that's bad, that's unpleasant. That's a memory of pain. And the unconscious portion of the mind, that weighs in too. Then the manas puts on a three-piece suit. Looks just like Perry Mason. And in front of the jury, that would be us, our consciousness, the manas summarizes what the mind functions have just found. And basically the manas says, look here, we have two choices. We have alternative A, and A has these consequences, and we have alternative B, and B has these consequences. Kindly make a decision and take an action. Then, the manas that has engaged the senses to go out into the world, the ego that weighs in what's pleasant to what's unpleasant, what's good, what's bad, the unconscious mind weighing in based on habit that is stored there. Then the manas says, look, you have two choices. You have alternative A and you have alternative B. These are the consequences of A, these are the consequences of B. Kindly make a decision and take an action. Then the mana says you have two basic choices, A or B, A or B, A or B, A or B. It gets annoying, doesn't it? It drains your battery. It's exhausting. Why is it so exhausting? Because the manas and the senses, the ego and the unconscious mind have no power to discriminate, determine, judge, or decide. So we keep on asking the question, should I do it or should I not do it? Should I do it or should I not do it? Should I do it or should I not do it? There might be an expert that I know or a friend. Do you think I should do it? We ask someone else, should we do it or should we not do it? Rather than counseling within, you see. But actually, the manas and the senses and the ego and the unconscious mind have provided us some very good information about the world. You see. And you see, sometimes the senses are correct, even though the senses have a limited perspective. Sometimes the ego is correct, even though the ego has a limited perspective. Sometimes the unconscious mind, our habit patterns, have the appropriate perspective, even though it might be limited. But how do we know? How do we know which is which? Fortunately, we have one more spoke, and that spoke is the key. It is our buddhi, our conscience, that aspect of the mind that operates as a mirror, that reflects perfect wisdom from the superconscious portion of the mind. The buddhi alone, our conscience, has the power to discriminate, determine, judge, and decide. So Patanjali, 2,000 years ago, codifying this ancient science of yoga, says all of yoga, all union, all happiness, all health, all reward and fullness begins with an understanding of and a coordination of the functions of the mind.